Thanks. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming. So can you hear me well, or do I need to use a microphone? Or... Okay, thanks. Oh, let's just disconnect. So.
Try to pull it out and put it back in. It worked last time.
Oh.
Something's happening here.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, great.
Don't touch it.
Yes, I won't. Great. Yeah. So yeah, as David said, I'm doing my PhD. I have one more year, and I work on responsibility and time. I'm part of this project called Lund-Gothenburg Responsibility Project. So we're just a few PhD students. We work on responsibility from like different angles, and I work on responsibility and time. Whether passage of time, all the changes in character that we all undergo affect our responsibility. But before I start, let me say a few words about responsibility. The way we use it in the philosophical literature. We use philosophy in different circumstances, right? We sometimes say, yeah, this guy is a really responsible guy. He's so punctual, for example, or something like that. So that's not the sense of responsibility that I'm going to talk about today. Sometimes we're like, yeah, if you're parents, for example, you have responsibilities, right, in terms of duties to take care of your kids. Again, that's not the sense of responsibility that we're going to cover today. And sometimes we just talk about causal responsibility, the ice outside caused, a fatal crash or something like that. The ice was responsible, but that's just a causal responsibility. Here we're just talking about moral responsibility. So something immoral happened, and people reacted to that, right? So if I lie to you, you react to me, right? You get angry, and you blame me for it, right? You show resentment, you express resentment. So that's the sense of responsibility that we're going to discuss today. And I won't go into topology of time and phenomenology of time. That's a whole other issue. Really interesting philosophy of time, but we won't cover that today. So yeah, that's it. Oh, come on. Right, so here's the outline of my talk. I'll start with a case of blameworthiness for wrongdoing. So what do I mean by saying that I'm blameworthy for wrongdoing? What do I mean by that? So I'll start with a case, and then we'll talk about what do philosophers mean when they say it is fitting for everyone to blame someone who has committed a wrongdoing in the past. What do they mean by that? What do they mean by fittingness? What do they mean by blame? Things like that, right? And then the final question, does time matter here or not? Does time play a role here in our responsibility practices, the way we blame people for their wrongdoings, or no? Time doesn't matter. So yeah, this is the outline of the talk. Let's start. Yeah, in case I just put some paintings in some of my slides in case you were just bored with the content. You can just enjoy the painting. Right. Okay. So we have Lars and Ella, and Lars cheats on Ella. Sorry for the dark case. And you know, Ella blames Lars for the cheating, for the act of cheating, for his wrongdoing, which is natural, right? We all get angry when these kind of things happen. So now the question is like, is Lars blameworthy? Can we say that he's blameworthy for the act of cheating? What are the conditions of being blameworthy for an action like that? So you might say that Lars knew what he was doing, right? He had control over it. And by doing that, he showed bad quality of will. So his action, I mean the act of cheating, reflects something about Lars' quality of will. His quality of will was bad, and his action shows that. He might not necessarily be a bad person, but his action shows something bad about him. So maybe there's something, I don't know, you know, some philosophers talk about flaw. There's a flaw in his character that resulted in that action, which is like the act of cheating, right? So then you might ask, is Ella's blame fitting? So these two questions are connected, and we'll get to that. But what do I mean by fitting when I talk about fittingness? So we know that Lars committed this wrongdoing, and then we know that that's why he's blameworthy, right? But what is it about fittingness here? Fitting blame, what does that mean? So you know, philosophers have talked about like fittingness and what it means. But you know, the fittingness relation can be glossed as the relation in which a response stands to a feature of the world when that feature merits or is worthy of that response. So here we are talking about like moral cases, right? But suppose like a non-moral case. I mean, do you think that, I mean, yeah, this is my favorite case, which is like, so do you think this lizard on my coat is scary? Is it dangerous? Probably not, right? It's not dangerous. But if you're scared of it, right? Then your fear is not fitting. Your fear doesn't fit this because this is not dangerous. But I don't know if it was real, for instance. Then your fear, which is an emotion, right? Your fear was fitting because it was real, and maybe real lizards are dangerous. I don't know. But since it's not real, then it's not dangerous, and that's the reason why your fear is not fitting. So when we talk about fittingness of a response, we're talking about that relation, right? So there's something real in the world that is worthy of that response, right? So if you're angry with me, you must have a reason. You must have a valid reason to be angry with me. So in the case that we just discussed, you saw that Ella had a reason, right? Because in fact, Ella, right? What Lars did was blameworthy. It was wrong. He cheated on her. That was a wrong action. So that's the reason why her anger, for instance, her blame is fitting. So that's about fittingness. So now the question is like, Lars is blameworthy for his wrongdoing to degree D, and this is a fact, right? This is a fact that what he did was wrong, and he's blameworthy. And therefore it is fitting for Allah to blame Lars for his wrongdoing to the same degree. This is a response. So that's all about the fittingness of blame. So when I talk about fittingness, I just talk about this fitting relation between a response and a fact. let's go back to our dark case. Years later, Ella still blames Lars for his cheating. Then you might ask, oh, wait, is Lars still blameworthy for what he did? Okay, I get it. When he did it, he was blameworthy. But on what grounds you're still blaming him? It was like, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Maybe it doesn't matter now. Why should we still blame him? And again, the question about fittingness. Is it still fitting for Ella to blame Lars for his cheating to the same degree now? Time has passed. I don't know, you might have different views now, right? Some of you might say, yes, he's still blameworthy, it doesn't matter. Some of you might it depends. That's the favorite response from philosophers, right? It depends. It depends on what? We have a few candidates here. I'll start with one. Is he better now? I mean, he's a good guy now, or no? He's just the same guy. He still cheats on, I don't know, and does the same thing, or no? He actually he's sorry for what he did, and he apologized for his sins, or so. The same character. I mean, when we talk about personal identity, does he have the same character now, or no? His character has changed, and he's a better person now. Philosophers have talked about different scenarios. For instance, suppose that a man aged 90, one of the few rightful holders of Nobel Prize, confesses that it was he who, at the age of 20, injured a policeman. Though this was a serious crime, this man may not now deserve to be punished. Parfit talks about punishment and legal responsibility, right? But you can expand what Parfit says to moral responsibility and say that, yeah, if Lars' character has changed enough and is a different person now, I mean characteristically, then Ella can just let it go. He's not blameworthy anymore. Or we have Corey and Madsen here. They think if an individual changes in the relevant way, she can become less blameworthy for a particular action. If an individual changes sufficiently, then she can stop being blameworthy altogether for a particular action. Blameworthiness, unlike diamonds, is not forever. So we're not talking about diamonds here, right? We're talking about blameworthiness. And according to these people, blameworthiness changes if an individual changes. So if Lars is a better person now, then he's not blameworthy for the act of cheating. Still others, I won't go into the details of that, but David Shoemaker believes that what really matters in blameworthiness over time, I mean blameworthiness for past actions, like our case, is whether Lars, for instance, can still identify with his past action, with his past will, with his past agency. If he can still identify with his past, and he's like, yeah, I did what I did, and it was right. Things like that show that he hasn't changed. So if there's this kind of relation between his current self and his past self, then he's blameworthy. But if he's a different person now, and if you ask him, why did you do that? He's like, I don't know. I still ask myself, why did I do it? Then you're like, okay, maybe he's not blameworthy anymore because his character has changed sufficiently and relevantly. And the second question that you might ask, I mean, when I ask you, should we stop just blaming Lars for his cheating, then you might say, yeah, it depends on his character and what he actually did. Did he apologize? Did he compensate, for instance? Did he try to like do something about what he did? Or no, he was just indifferent. Again, you have like different accounts here. For instance, again, David Shoemaker thinks that we take ourselves to have lost our reason of fit to continue having hard feelings when the agent acknowledges his past fault, right? When I truly acknowledge, yeah, it was me. I'm so sorry for what I did. I express remorse. That remorse shows something to you. That yeah, this guy is really sorry for his past. Then David Shoemaker thinks that's enough to say that he's not a fitting target of blame. So we should stop blaming Lars because he just acknowledged his past fault. Here you have Hironomi. She thinks what really matters is like a kind of retribution or apology or atonement or things like that. So I should show you that. I mean, by apology, but by offering you apology or making amends or things like that, I should show you that what I did won't happen again. I won't do it again. So these kind of things show you that this won't happen again. Again, this is something that affects the way you blame Lars or Ella blame Lars. And then you have Hannah Tierney. She thinks that what really matters is the kind of duties that, for instance, Lars has in virtue of what he did in the past. Again, duties such as apology or compensation or making amends and things like that. So all these people actually say almost the same thing, that if something bad happened in the past, then Lars should apologize, should make amends, and should compensate for it. And when he actually did that, then we have no reason to continue blaming him, and Ella has no reason to blame him more. So these are like different accounts on why blameworthiness or responsibility diminishes over time. But the crucial point about all these accounts is like something is happening, right? So for instance, Lars' character might change over time. So I don't know, he might go to a therapist, for instance, and try to just cure himself in some way. So something happened, right? Or for example, when he makes amends, or when he apologizes, he actually does something, right? But what if he doesn't? Suppose that it's been like 40 years now since Lars cheated on Ella, and he has the same character, right? He has never apologized, never compensated, nothing really happened. So what we just discussed, I mean, all those accounts about how blameworthiness diminishes over time, we're like, okay, if the agent does this, if the agent does that, then that would diminish his blameworthiness. But in this case, Lars' character hasn't changed, and he hasn't apologized, he hasn't compensated. He hasn't even tried to repair his damaged relationship. So what about this case? How should we still continue blaming him, or no? There's something different now. Again, the same question. Is it still fitting for Allah to blame him for his wrongdoing to the same degree? Again, when we were discussing all those accounts on blameworthiness, we were like, yeah, something is happening. at least he apologized, and that's enough. But now he hasn't apologized. Is it still fitting for us or for Allah to blame him for his cheating? That's where time comes into play, right? So the topic of this talk is time and responsibility. It's not changes in character and responsibility. It's not like reparative duties and responsibility. It's just time and responsibility. Whether the passage of time, the sheer passage of time, affects fittingness of blame. So that's the overarching question of this talk. Before going into that question, I need a second to talk about law, right, and legal responsibility. In legal responsibility, there's something that some of you might have heard: the statute of limitations. So according to this law, in circumstances where there's no death or serious injury, or a foreseeable risk of death or serious injury, the sheer passage of time diminishes legal responsibility. It's just the passage of time, nothing else. So the criminal wasn't really punished, nothing happened. He didn't even go to the trial, for instance. It was just the sheer passage of time. And yeah, there are several cases of this. For instance, rape, sexual assault, debt, breach of an oral or written contract, fraud, deception, even bodily harm. A lot of things. So the statute of limitation actually covers these sort of actions. So if I did one of these, I don't know, things in the past, and it's now been like 40 years, and I haven't been punished for it, then I'm not legally responsible for it anymore. At least you can't make a case against me when it was just a long time ago. And yeah, they have their own reasons. They think that they do this to protect people from claims made after conflicts had gotten old, for instance, or evidence had vanished, memories had faded, for instance, or witnesses had died. So these are the reasons why we have this law, this statute of limitation. Now, yeah, we're not here to talk about law, but the question is like whether we can apply this to moral responsibility. Whether we can say, yeah, what Lars did was just 40 years ago, and now, because it was 40 years ago, then Allah can't really. It's not fitting for Allah to blame Lars. So now the question is like whether we can apply this to moral responsibility. I think we can, to some extent, and I hope I succeed in my arguments. I think to some degree we can say that the sheer passage of time affects the way we fittingly blame people. And I think it matches our intuitions when we talk about like past wrongdoings and things like that. Something that happened a long time ago, it really doesn't matter for me. I mean, when you compare it with something that just happened, for instance, yesterday. So when I compare these two, I'm like, yeah, it has less significance to me when I think about it now because it was just 40 years ago. I mean, I did something to you when I was just a teenager, and now we're both grown up, and yeah, I had control over what I was doing. I knew what I was doing, but it's been like, I don't know, 20 years so maybe we should just let it go. Things like that. So whether we can apply this to moral responsibility. And to support this intuition, we need an argument, right? I mean, that's, we all do in philosophy. We have intuitions and then we try to argue for it. I'll talk about arguments from partiality. So these arguments might help me to establish my argument in arguing that the sheer passage of time actually affects fittingness of blame. So I need this argument to argue for what I want to argue, right? If it makes sense. But what is partiality? What is partiality? So the partiality is the special concern that we display for ourselves and other people with whom we stand in special personal relationships. That's partiality. So, for instance, you probably have personal commitments, right? Goals, hobbies, as well as personal relationships you value with your family, friends, and colleagues. You see these endeavors as giving you good reasons for actions. You are partial to your hobby of playing drums, even though you could spend your time doing something better from an impartial point of view, right? You could just, I don't know, help people promote goods in life and things like that. But you were just interested in playing drums, and that's totally fine, right? You gave more weight to your interests, and that's totally fine. And that's the special concerns that people talk about when they talk about partiality. And it's also true about your relationships. So when it comes to your relationships, you see yourself as owing more to your children, spouse, and friends than to people who are completely unrelated to you. So you just take care of your own kid, right? That's totally fine. So people have like distinguished between like required partiality and permissible partiality. I won't go into that. That's a rabbit hole. The only thing that I just want to say now is like we have this like special concerns about things that are relevant to us now, that are connected to us now, that are close to us again now, right? So why can't we apply the same framework to time? I think we have the same relationship with time. When I think about my past, my distant past, and my recent past, again, I have the same intuition. I care more about my recent past. I care more about my yesterday when I compare it to my distant past, 20 years ago. So we have the same intuition when we talk about time. So it's not only about personal relationships, it's about time as well. So when I think about time, things that I did, things that you did to me, I actually consider this kind of partiality in my arguments. So with that in mind, let's go back to our case. Ella has her own projects, desires, commitments, and goals that are currently relevant to her relationship with Lars. Imagine her as this, her mindset as this cluster of things that are all together, her beliefs, her desires, commitments, goals, everything that is just connected to herself now. She cares about things that are important to her now, right? And the act of cheating happened 40 years ago. So instead of impartially blaming Lars for all his past faults, right? Instead of just giving weight to all of Lars' past fault equally, she just cares about more recent one, right? And that makes sense. it makes sense to blame Lars for something that he did just yesterday more than what he did 40 years ago. I'm not saying that Lars is not blameworthy anymore. I'm not saying that blame is not fitting anymore. The only thing that I'm saying is like blame is less fitting, right? Or better say that less blame is fitting. Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Less blame is fitting because it was just a long time ago. It belongs to distant past. That's why Allah has reasons to fittingly assign less blame to Lars for his remote past actions. So again, here we're only talking about degrees of blameworthiness, right? And degrees of fitting blame. So it is fitting for her to blame him less. That's the only thing that I'm defending here. Again, you might have like different variations of this argument. You might say that it is required for Allah to blame him less, or you might only say that it is only permissible for her to blame him less. Either way, what really matters here is like it is fitting for her to blame him less. So this is the very last slide and almost my conclusion. I just want to conclude that when we talk about time and blameworthiness, we should recognize the dynamics of blame, right? We can't just say that, yeah, a blameworthy action happened 40 years ago, another blameworthy action happened 20 years ago, and another one just yesterday, and we just give weight to all of them equally. No, I think that's wrong. The passage of time actually affects the way we blame people and the way it is fitting to blame people for their past wrongdoings. And we should recognize this dynamics when we think about blame. So the degree of fitting blame changes over time, right? Even when the agent's character retains the same flaw, or they fail to make amends for their past wrongdoings. And I know it remains open whether fittingness of less blame implies less blameworthiness. I mean, can't you just say, yeah, you're right, Hadi. It's fitting for Allah to blame Lars less, but does that mean that others can't blame him to the same degree now? So is it something that only affects Allah's blame or everybody's blame? That's an open question. We can discuss that in Q&A. But what I wanted to argue here was like the act of blaming appears to be sensitive to the passage of time. Again, sheer passage of time. And time matters in responsibility. Thanks for listening.
Right, so we have time for some questions. I have a question. I'm thinking about forgiveness. Is it good to blame someone less? What do you think?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You might say that it has like some pragmatic value, right? Because when you forgive someone, you just let it go. Mm-hmm. So you don't keep it in yourself, right? That's a good thing.
But how does it relate to responsibility?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, forgiveness is so relevant here. When you forgive someone, then it's no longer, at least some people argue that when you blame someone, then it's no longer fitting. You can unforgive someone, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you can unforgive someone, I don't know. If they repeat the same action again, then you might unforgive them. But when you forgive them, then you no longer blame them, right? So yeah, forgiveness is so relevant here.
Is it responsible to forgive?
You mean we have a duty to forgive?
I'm asking you. What
Oh.
you
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, right. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, some people have argued that when some conditions are met, we should forgive because we have enough reasons to forgive. There are enough grounds to forgive, and if you don't forgive, for example, in this case, if Lars acknowledges his past fault, for instance, then according to Shoemaker, you should forgive.
Yeah, otherwise you're blameworthy for holding a grudge.
Yeah, for her. Yeah.
Yes.
I was wondering, do you think it matters the passage of time if we measure from when the deed was done or when Ella got to know it? If Lars was unfaithful 40 years ago and Ella gets to know about it today, but is the passage of time, does it have the same dynamic?
That's a really good question. Yeah, that's if something blameworthy happened 40 years ago and Ella didn't know about it, it's just an epistemic issue, right? I mean, epistemic in the sense that it's just Ella who doesn't know. But the blameworthy act happened actually a long time ago. So blameworthiness is there, right? And then the question of fitting blame is an interesting question. Whether I think in that case, then Ella can still fittingly blame him to the same degree because she just realized that, right? But blameworthiness is already there, right? Nothing can affect that.
We had questions over here first. Yes.
So I was wondering if maybe there's room for possibly taking this one step further and arguing that maybe it's not just a sheer passage of time in terms of blameworthiness, but maybe there's a way to, deconstruct it, into a more pragmatic set of aspects, such as, for instance, when you were making an example of legal responsibility, how that deconstructs further into, legal responsibility can go away over time due to witnesses passing away and dissipating memories and so on and so forth. And to that, I could also add, just the administrative costs. So, let's say for the government, it makes sense to you can't dwell on crimes from the past indefinitely. Could it be also, a more pragmatic way for individuals that the passage of time, what it really reflects is, as you were also mentioning, the potential change in the character and personality of this individual, that our brain predominantly operates as a predicting machine. So let's say the passage of time implies that, okay, this person probably changed so that they are less likely to do that in the future, and that defines your trust. Maybe it's not just the sheer passage of time, but maybe there's more kind of coded into it.
That's true. Yeah, because usually they come together, right? The passage of, we all change, right? Both victim and the perpetrator both change over time. They change their character. Their character changes, and they have like different values and things like that. And yeah, you're right. When the two come together, then I think it makes an even more, an even stronger argument to say that blameworthiness diminishes over time. When you see that this guy has really changed, he's a different person now, right? So what I was trying to show here was like, okay, but what if, we see cases like this, right? That the guy is just like that. It's for like a long time, and he's still the same guy. He hasn't really changed, and he hasn't even once apologized. He did nothing about his past, but we're still in a relationship, in some sort of relationship with him. He's still our colleague, so we see him every day, something like that. But he hasn't done anything. So what happens with with a fitting blame, should we still blame him, or things like that? The sheer passage of time, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that's just one example of a practical thing to kind of trying to estimate, can I still trust this person? The other aspect could be, maybe it's just not worthy of my energy and I need to focus on other things in my life, on raising my children and things like that. So maybe there are all sorts of considerations, or also maybe it just faded in memory and it doesn't have the same place in your life anymore.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Some people have argued, like for instance, Howard. He argues that this is like a bit. So he argues that it is, you are normatively required to react, to blame someone who committed something wrong in the past, but at the same time you have like other normative reasons, right? You have to you have to take care of your kids, and you have like other duties in your life, and sometimes these like normative reasons compete with each other. So yeah, you're right. And then, as you say, sometimes we have just some pragmatic reasons to just let go of blame and just move on.
Yeah, and I think what happens a lot of the times is that we just, as you were saying, we have the intuitions, and maybe we just do it kind of automatically, and we just put this label on it. Oh, time has passed, time heals, but there are probably more processes that happen just on the psychological level that have some kind of pragmatic reasons behind them.
Thank you. There. Yes. Who was next in line? Did you see?
No, sorry, I didn't.
Right. Well, we have Engla.
Right. Do you mean that blameworthiness can only diminish in this argument? Or because you spoke earlier about Ella and about her beliefs and desires and such, and perhaps it was implied that when time passes, it's not as relevant anymore what Lars did to her current beliefs and desires and whatever.
Yeah.
But it could also be the case that it becomes more relevant, even.
Yeah.
And what he did is even more harmful now. Would it still diminish, or could it increase?
I think the argument for partiality is open to that interpretation as well, right? That it can go both ways, right? It can decrease or it can diminish, both ways. I mean, if the only thing that matters is the current projects, current commitments, current desires, beliefs, and everything, this cluster of things, then maybe something becomes even more relevant over time to this cluster. And then in that sense, then more blame is fitting. I think the argument is open to that interpretation as well.
Okay. So Lars' degree would be the same as in worthiness, but what would change would be the fittingness, and that would be due to Ella, or like connected to her rather than Lars in that case. If retention of the thought doesn't matter, or like or the bad character or quality of will.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to think about that because it might. Because in that case you might overblame someone, right? I mean, you might blame Lars to the degree that he doesn't deserve it, right? Yeah, that's a good point. I need to think about the other side that you mentioned.
Now we have you here in the back.
I had some thoughts on something I think what you said.
A bit louder, please.
Yeah, maybe blame or blame worthiness and fittiness from blame are not always proportional to each other to the same degree. Like if in the beginning it was proportional to like degree D, but after like time passes, maybe like Lars is still blameworthy to the same degree, but it is not fitting for Ella to blame him to the same degree for her own sake. I mean, because is it good for her to, like the question is that even if he's still the same person, he hasn't changed, maybe he's still cheating, hasn't made amends and so on, he doesn't change, he hasn't changed at all. But is it good for her to live with him for 40 years? Or
That's a good point.
or to live with these feelings of anger and resentment and blame him for 40 years? Is it good for her? And this is also like for pragmatic reasons and for emotional reasons, for all kinds of reasons. Like, is it fitting behavior? And also like about the question of forgiveness, like I would say that at least like I have heard that there are many definitions of forgiveness, but there is a good fear that forgiveness is not for the person who has done wrong, but for the person who forgives. So it's good for her to forgive him. It doesn't mean that he's not blameworthy or that he hasn't done anything wrong. It means that he doesn't expect him to change anymore, and he lets go. And he, maybe she leaves him and continues her life elsewhere. so this is what makes, he's still as blameworthy as 40 years ago, but it's not fitting for her to live with the same feelings for 40 years.
That's completely true. And that's why I mentioned in the end that this is an open question whether this, my argument about fittingness of blame will extend to blameworthiness, right? That's a good point. Yeah, you're right. But I will have to think more about the ways in which I can distinguish these two from each other.
We had some questions in the front as well. Did you have one?
It connects to what everyone has been saying, so it sort of feels redundant. But I feel like if they're living together for such a long time, it's hard for me to say that simply time has passed but nothing has changed. So I was wondering if there is a difference between this case that you present and, for instance, say I was assaulted once 20 years ago, and then me and the assaulter, we went with our different ways, and then we meet up 20 years later, and I say, time may have changed, but since our relationship is exactly the same, we haven't met in 20 years.
Right.
So for me, like, this is, we're still in the same phase, whereas it just seemed so weird for Ella to keep living in this. In the end, it almost felt like that's on her. But everyone has been touching on the same issue, so.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's right. Yeah, because yes, since they were living together, then a lot of things might have changed. Yeah, you're right.
Would you say there's a qualitative change between this example and, for instance, or say you were bullied in school, and then 20 years or 30 years passed, and then you meet your bully and you say, I still blame you. Can you, is there a difference? Or?
Yeah, there's a difference. Yeah, I think you're right. There's a difference. Maybe a case like that would capture the intuition that I want to get from this case even better, right? A case that, they were not living together.
I don't know. I still hold a grudge. I still hold a grudge for my bully 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But if I were to be living with him, I hope I wouldn't be holding that grudge.
Was there another question over there? Yeah, you.
So I was wondering, do I understand it correctly if, according to the partiality argument, blameworthiness is only indirectly connected to the passage of time, because the passage of time often comes with change in personal commitments or whatever, which can go, as a previous question, as in any direction. And if that is the correct interpretation, do you think there's also some like direct necessary connection between blameworthiness and passage of time itself?
No, I don't think there's a direct. At least I haven't come up with an argument for it. That there is like a direct relation between the passage of time and blameworthiness. No, I haven't.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have 1,000 questions, so I will try to just ask one or two twice. First off, is there, how should you try to say it in English? Is there an aspect of permanent damage? For example, say at the age of 15, someone hurt you so bad you can't walk ever again, so you will live your life in a wheelchair. So the damage of their acting is permanent for you throughout your life. Things will never ever be the same. Could you still blame them for not being able to walk because what they did was with they might not have had the what's the word? They might not try to put you in the wheelchair, but they did something to you with their intentions. They wanted to hurt you, but not make it so bad. So does that affect the blameworthiness over time? Because in the case with Lars and Ella, like as Miriam said before, holding a grudge, we shouldn't hold grudge. I hold one grudge over my life. I have a grudge towards a fellow student from high school. Won't let it go with ever, I think. It's for petty sake, but I should. It doesn't matter. But being not able to walk, it does matter for a person. So does it make a difference?
Yes, it does. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the gravity of past actions affects blameworthiness in a way that, people have argued, sometimes blameworthiness is forever. I mean, yeah, we need to define what forever means, but yeah, it is forever because what I did is, I mean, I can't undo it again, right? It's I can't compensate for the damage that I caused, for instance, right? Even if I apologize like 100 times, it won't really affect the facts, right?
Even if you cut your own legs off, it won't help.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, in those cases, you might say, that blameworthiness is, or the fittingness of blame is for a long time, right? Even if not forever, but at least for a long time. Because yeah, there are that's
You?
Thanks, Hadi. I really liked the connection to special relationships idea. In thinking about partiality, there are some grounds for partiality seem to be somehow objective. So if someone is your friend, it's not just that you feel like helping them more and that because you feel like it, because it's more important to you, you have a sort of justified to do that to a certain extent. But it's also that you should do so. You have obligations to your friends that you don't have to perfect strangers. So here you have a kind of objective relationship. And then you have the other sort of thing you mentioned, you have personal projects, and they're more closely tied to what you care about. Not necessarily at the moment. You might think that those also ground obligations. Right now I don't feel like, say, if I'm an athlete, I don't feel like practicing it right now, but maybe I have obligations to myself based on this being a sort of a life project. So there might also be an objective element, and not just what I feel about, what I feel like doing, and what feels important in the moment. So I wonder if our stress is more the objective connection than sort of in particular the comparison with relationships like friendship. I wonder if there might be a corresponding objective change in relation to your past as time goes by. That's not about whether I still care about the same thing. It's still the case that I'm less proximally related to myself 40 years ago than myself 20 years ago, even though I care about roughly the same things. So I was just wanted to say that there are these different aspects in the partiality debate, and some might pull more to a pure passage of time direction,
Right.
go more towards the pure passage of time direction, and others more like to what I happen to care about now. Is the thing that happened to me still important to things I care about? And that might be a slightly different thing. It raises the sort of questions that we talked about. Can fitness of blame increase when I start to care about things that were harmed 40 years ago?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. If partiality gives us normative reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I think that's enough, right? So either objective or subjective, as long as we have normative reasons to blame less, then again these normative reasons are just competing with each other, right? I have this normative reasons based on my projects, my interests, that I should give more weight to them now, and I have this interest of mine, or this, as a matter of fact, it is normatively permissible or required that I should blame Lars. So these normative reasons are just competing with each other, and yeah, you're right, it might be just this subjective kind of thing going on in the background. But as long as it is just normative, according to arguments from partiality, then I can just blame him less, and that is fitting. So I don't underblame something like that. Yeah. Is that? Or maybe we can talk about it.
Yes.
You?
Oh, yes,
Oh.
Take it.
Okay.
Jag tror du var
I
först.
don't.
Okay. I was thinking this is not my subject, but I was thinking that when you take this case, it sounds to me that you make them at the same part, that they have the same value, that they have made the same agrees. What fate to be unfair is the same, and because I was thinking that it depends how you blame each other. Of what the value of a marriage or what it can be. And then I was thinking also that time is one of the things that give you a reason to look at things with distance, and you develop of this, and so I think for me it's very difficult to see this, what you're talking about, without putting other things in it. Do you think you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Because and if I am responsibility to this, I am also responsibility to respond to the other person. This is my responsibility. So in that way, I think because you are it takes two to tango. So it's very interesting, but it's very difficult subject.
Yeah, fine. No, yeah, that's yeah, you're right. Yeah, everything comes together over time, and we should just look at this whole complex picture. Yeah, you're right. Things that they value might differ from things that I value, right? And these actually affect what happens in the relationship, the way they blame each other. Yeah, we have like pragmatic values, as yeah, some of you said, and yeah, all this contribute to blame writers over time. Yeah, you're right.
Did we have someone here? We'll
Yeah, we have.
see if we have. Yes? Yep.
Thank you for a nice talk.
Louder, please.
Thank you for a nice talk. So I sort of have terminological question, but it's not very terminological in fact. So based on your responses now to some of the questions, I was thinking, in the talk you kept saying that it's the sheer passage of time, and then the event that happened more recently might have, or you really try to convince us that it has a bigger impact on the current situation than what was in the past. And then I was thinking, is it the passage of time that defines it, or is it the events themselves? Because if something happened more recently, yes, it's clear and fresh in my memory and in my mind, but maybe something from a long time ago actually impacts my current cluster, as you refer to this, impacts more. So is it the things that happened during this time, or is it the time itself? I just was confused about the terminology and how it's on your slides and how it was in the discussion, because it's sort of
Right. Yeah, no, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, something is happening. Yeah, you're right. And this is somehow connected to your question. So if I did something to you and then I went to a coma for like 20 years, then time hasn't passed for me, right? Because nothing has changed for me. I just wake up and then, oh, things are new. There's iPhone. What is this? So I didn't experience anything. So time was just stopped for me, right? In a sense, at least for me, time was stopped. And yeah, it happened to me during Corona. You know, Corona time was like, there's something. Time stopped before Corona. Anyway, so in that sense, you might say that yeah, time is change. So when we talk about time, we're talking about change. But you know, sometimes we talk about changes in the attitudes or beliefs and desires of the perpetrator that philosophers have talked about, and I discussed it today. Those who argue that what really matters is whether this guy has really changed and he's a better guy, or things like that. And today I just wanted to talk about the other side, which is the victim. The victim has her own projects, desire, values, beliefs that change over time, right? And these actually affect fittings of blame. So yeah, you're right. It's not only the passage of time. But if you think about time as change, then in some sense it is time. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I was thinking about life quality and circumstances of life with fitting blame. Maybe it's a bit of the time perspective. But somehow I have an intuition that I want to blame people less if they have a low quality of life. So maybe Lars and Ella, which quality of life do they exist within? Because maybe cheating is not important even, especially after, I don't know, what could have happened to them? Maybe something extremely terrible happened 20 years later on. Yeah, it was just a thought.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's yes, you know, social circumstances, or as you say, you know, quality of life and things like that actually affect the way in which we want to blame people, right? I mean, some people have called it appropriateness of blame, or all things considered blame. I mean, when you consider everything, and now you're like, okay, should I blame him now? He's my friend, he's a close friend, I know his parents, you know, these are like other reasons that you might have. Or he's a poor guy, maybe I shouldn't really blame him. You know, these kind of considerations that you might have. Or they have suffered enough, for instance. You might say, yeah, this guy has suffered enough, he has had enough. Why should I bother with blaming him? But that doesn't mean that he's not blameworthy, right? There's this kind of distinction between all things considered blame, that you might just prefer not to blame, but that doesn't mean that the guy is not blameworthy. He's still blameworthy, but you won't blame him. Yeah.
I was thinking about what you said, that we are more engaged in things that happened yesterday, a week ago, than for something that happened 4 years ago or even further ago. And doesn't that depend on the gravity of what has happened? For example, if Lars' name was Jeffrey, last name Dahmer, and he tells Ella that, oh, sorry honey, I cheated on you a week ago with my colleague, and by the way, I did these heinous crimes in the 70s where I slaughtered a bunch of people. Wouldn't you think Ella would maybe overlook the cheating part of the confession?
Yeah, that's true. And that's the dynamics of blame, right? But again, I think it is connected to the previous question, you know. It actually doesn't affect the degree to which Lars deserve to be blamed, right? It's just, you know, these other considerations that we might have, that no, that action is even worse. So let us blame him for that first, and then we'll talk about cheating. So yeah, that's what, yeah. I think she was first, and then it's you.
Yeah, just a quick comment that was prompted by this question here. I had similar thoughts when I was listening to the presentation, that yes, there's kind of the underlying assumption in this particular case that both sides are in agreement that cheating is wrong, and therefore this action is blameworthy. But then I think it's also very interesting to think about situations where it's not so straightforward, where it's not clear. And I think a classic example is the relationship between children and parents. I see a lot of people who become adults and they continue blaming their parents for something they've done wrong in the upbringing, and they attribute certain issues that they're experiencing today as adults, and they blame, oh, that's because you, when you were raising me, you did this or you didn't do that. But I'd say it's not very straightforward. It may be so, it may be not, but it's pretty much impossible to tell right now. Is it nature, nurture, or anything else? So
Yeah.
it's very difficult to deal with those situations.
No, yeah, that's true. Yeah, different values, different circumstances, different times, you know. Sometimes we're just talking about, like, I don't know, 18th century and the values back then, and now we're talking about our values, things that happen now. I mean, we have like Me Too movement and things like that. So these kind of things heavily affect the way we blame people, right? So yeah, you're right. Yeah, these values. So yeah.
What is the relationship between like responsibility and like the butterfly effect, or the events that might come? For instance, what if you do something today and something bad, really bad happens tomorrow, an hour after your action, then intuitively I would say that many would blame you for the bad action, for the bad event. But if you do something and something bad happens 20 years later, as a large amount of time has passed, but are you still as blameworthy, or are you less blameworthy because of the passage of time?
Right. Yeah, that's also a good point. Yeah, I mean, people have like different views on that, right? Some people say that you're not blameworthy for the outcome. Some people say that you're only responsible for the outcome, not blameworthy. Some say that if there is a connection between what you did in the past and the results that are coming now, these results are relevant to what you did, or in some sense, it was desired by you that this happened in the future, something like that. Or you had like some sort of intention to bring that up in the future, so that would make you blameworthy for it. So, yeah.
I also have something about blameworthiness and identity and time. So I read about some man who had a psychotic episode and beheaded someone at a bus stop.
Wow.
And then he was in court or being examined, and they wanted to free him because he wasn't himself. And he said, if I didn't do it, who did? And he wanted to go to be punished for it. Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, it is.
And then, when we think about who is to be blamed, and we also see, we've been talking about time and how it diminishes the effect, but then sometimes we notice these, we assign blame to, for example, all the white people who are alive now, and things like that.
Yeah, that's true. Or nations, for instance,
Yeah,
right?
nations.
Or Germans now blameworthy for what happened during World War II, for instance.
Yeah. No, they're not.
Yeah. No, when we talk about like the passage of time and things that happened a long time ago,
Yeah.
and
Guilty by association.
yeah.
Yeah. Let me see who is. It's just.
Yeah, there's a really relevant case to what you were saying, where the oil companies of the 70s predicted global warming and climate change, and kept it secret, or at least they downplayed it and they shuffled the cards, so to speak, and the effects we are seeing now and into the future. And I would say, like, it seems hard for me to stomach that just because that they knew it 40 years ago diminishes their responsibility, where actually it seems they would be more blameworthy.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, that's similar to Engla's question. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, things become relevant, and to some extent, what Unar said, things become relevant again, and then you realize, wow, these are the facts. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, again, I need to think about the ways in which what is fitting is different from blameworthiness or punishworthiness, you can call it. Yeah, I think that's the second point. But yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Do we have one last question before we wrap up and go to Valk?
Yeah, I would also argue something similar, like in the case with a parent and child, and something abusive is happening when they're growing up, and maybe it's not that big a deal, but 20 years later, grown up, I realize that this thing has shaped me, and maybe I have this psychotic episode and behead someone, or I don't know, or just realize that what I thought was a minor thing, what maybe was a minor thing, had major psychological effects on me.
Yeah.
Would that have made that the blameworthiness has increased with time instead?
Yeah, that's
Or the fittingness.
Or the fittingness,
of
yeah.
Yeah.
Rather the
yeah,
fittingness.
again, I think the argument is open to that interpretation. The argument is open to this interpretation that in some cases things become relevant again, and
Yeah.
then it's fitting to blame even more because you see the outcomes and everything. But again, the crucial point is like the fact that now I want to blame more. Does that mean that the guy is more
Yeah.
blameworthy?
Yeah.
Because he just might say, "Oh, come on, I don't deserve this," right? Something like that. Or you might have an idea. I say that no, you actually deserve it. yeah, these are like ways of seeing the same phenomena, but yeah,
The
the
way-
argument is basically all of that.
The way children were raised 50 years ago was right then, and it's
Yeah.
wrong now. You know. Yeah. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.